Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Would the clerk please take attendance?
All council members are present this evening.
Okay. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing no comments, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Collins,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Tiltonburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Bacon,
Aye.
Frank.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, move on to open forum. We have a proclamation tonight, the 100th anniversary of the Maderi chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And is that mic on? Oh, if you guys want to stand right here, I'm sure there might be a picture from the newspaper too. So. Okay, so I talked to Roberta earlier. I'm going to announce Daughters of the American Revolution the first time and then DAR after that.
That's fine.
Okay. Whereas the Maderi chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, formerly known as the John Kerr chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, was organized on March 7th, 1921. And whereas the Maderi chapter of DAR is celebrating their 100th year of service in the community, state, and country. And whereas more than 50 Maderi chapter members represent hundreds of patriots who dedicated their lives and fortunes for their freedom. And whereas members volunteer their time and money to honor and support veterans and current deployed military members. And whereas the Maderi chapter, DAR, spends countless hours preserving American history and encouraging observance of Constitution Week, Good Citizens Awards, and college scholarships, as well as many other civic, environmental, and educational concerns. And whereas the Maderi chapter, DAR, has achieved longevity and success because of the chapter's hard work and commitment. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Opke G. Niemeyer, Mayor of the City of Brookings, do here proclaim this evening, August of 2021, Maderi chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution Day. In witness of thereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause to be affixed the great seal of the City of Brookings this evening, August 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
If you want to take the liberty to explain your chapter a little bit, Roberta taught me a little bit this evening. I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, first of all, I would like to give you one of our hymns that we had made up special for our centennial. So on July 17th, we celebrated our 100th anniversary at the Atrium in the Children's Museum. And DAR started in Brookings in 1921, and in 1929 they were instrumental in erecting the Maderi Monument. And when we look back at our history, back in 2015, we found out that our members wanted to be called the Maderi chapter. And so in 2015, the oldest member in our group, M.K. Huggins, made a motion that we change our name to the Maderi chapter. And we have a great group of women, and it's a national organization, and we have 10 chapters in South Dakota. Right.
That's right. And as you well know, that with COVID, we had to push our celebration, obviously, till summer, because March was probably not a good month to try to do anything.
Okay, so are some of you national officers or have been?
I'm a past state regent, and so
Okay.
that's part of the national board. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Okay, the next item is item 5B, Household Hazardous Waste Event. And Katie Stiegelmeier, our Solid Waste Department Administrative Assistant, will present.
Evening. Like you said, I'm Katie Stiegelmeier. I'm assistant at the landfill for the solid waste division of the Public Works Department. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a update on the household hazardous waste event that we have coming up.
Katie, could you speak into the mic a little bit more? Take the other mic or whatever, so it's closer. Very soft-spoken.
Is that better? So this year is going to be our first annual household hazardous waste event. It's going to be held on, that's a Saturday. It's going to be from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we're going to be hosting it at the Swift Health Center parking lot. It's going to be available for Hamlin, Dual, Kingsbury, Brookings, Lake, and Moody County residents. It is going to be a free event. We are just asking for a recommended donation of a non-perishable food item, which will be donated to the Brookings Food Pantry. And we have hired a third party called Veolia to help us with this event. They're kind of the industry experts, and they are going to help us handle the waste, package the waste, transport the waste, and properly dispose of the waste. And traffic flow was one of the things that we wanted to make sure, flows well, and we don't have any long lines or disrupt any, traffic on 6th Street. So I have ran this plan by Chief Erickson and Jeremy from the Streets Department. We plan on having people enter from 32nd Avenue. We'll have 2 lanes of stacking capability if needed. Otherwise, we'll just utilize 1 if everything's flowing well. And then exit off of 34th Avenue. And everybody thought that would be a good traffic pattern, flow pattern to eliminate any issues. And then just a little bit about why we're changing it to a household hazardous waste event versus the paint exchange. The paint exchange has been a really popular event, but it's paint only. And after looking at some of the past records, in 2019, there was still 400 gallons of paint left after the exchange. Typically, we gave that to the restore, but the restore is temporarily not accepting open cans of paint. So we decided to maybe evolve the event a little bit and try a household hazardous waste disposal event where people can dispose of, aerosols, batteries, household cleaners, CFL bulbs, automotive products, rodent killers, weed killers, all of those things that you might have in your garages or sheds or basements or, things you're looking to get rid of and you don't know how. And again, Veolia will be there to help us with that. And a little bit on why. I receive daily phone calls and questions on where to dispose of these type of items. Currently, there is no local outlet to dispose of these items. So we were asking the question of where are they going? Are they going down the drain? Are they going on the ground, storm sewers, in the trash? Are they just sitting in garages, sheds, and basements? And according to the EPA and CDC, improper disposal of household hazardous waste can pose risk to sanitation workers, the environment, septic tanks and wastewater treatment facilities, our children, pets, and they could even catch fire, react, or explode. So our solution was to evolve the paint exchange to a household hazardous waste collection event. It's going to be free. It's going to provide a local drop-off, and it's going to offer a safe, environmentally responsible way to dispose of these items. Any questions I can answer?
Council Tilton Burn.
Two questions. One is able to bring paint to this event. Is
Yes,
that one
paint
of the
is
items?
one of the items that will be.
Wonderful.
Yep.
My other question is there any specific way anyone should bring certain items? Like one of the photos you showed had the light bulbs in a plastic Ziploc bag. Do folks need to put their light bulbs in a plastic bag first, or are there any certain ways they need to present the items?
No, just bags, cardboard boxes. However, we'll have people there to offload the items and assist with that. We'll just ask people to stay in their cars and we'll offload it for them.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
And Katie, this is actually her idea. Right around 6 months now, great addition to the organization and a wonderful idea. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
5C, our 2020 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report and Audit Summary. Ashley Wrench will be our presenter.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight I'll give a quick recap of the statement audit for 2020. In this presentation, I'll discuss the components of our annual report and our 2020 financial statements in terms of the statement of net position and statement of activities, which are similar to a private company's balance sheet and income statement. I'll also discuss some highlights for 2020 and our financial statement audit and the results of that process, and I'll let you know where you can access the full report if you'd like to take a closer look. The City of Brookings participates in the Government Financial Officers Association Certificate of Achievement Program for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This requires that our comprehensive annual financial report be audited and that all funds and component units are included. It also requires a statistical section with economic and demographic information, and we received this award for our 2019 financial statements, and we were one of only 4 South Dakota municipalities to receive this award. We also submitted our 2020 financial statements for this award as well. This comprehensive report provides users with the most complete picture of our financial position, and the Department of Legislative Audit gathers the annual reports of all municipalities for state legislators and other municipalities to use for comparability purposes and also decision making. And then creditors, grantors, and financial institutions and credit rating agencies also use this information to determine our credit risk and creditworthiness as well. The annual comprehensive financial report is basically a snapshot of the city's financial position at the same time each year, and it includes the operations of the city as well as those of Brookings Municipal Utilities and Brookings Health System. The City of Brookings reported 23 governmental funds in 2020, and that includes our general fund as well as all of our special revenue, debt service, and capital projects funds. We also reported 12 proprietary funds. That includes our enterprise funds such as the municipal utilities and the health system, as well as city-owned enterprises such as the airport, liquor store, and landfill. We also have 2 internal service funds, which are our medical and dental self-insurance funds for employees, and our 2 fiduciary funds, which are our employee flex benefits and an account for the Rural Fire Association. The first financial statement I'll discuss is the statement of net position, and you can think of net position as the city's net worth. The city ended 2020 with a net position of $427 million, and that's an increase of $38 million over the calendar year. Net position is basically made up of 3 components. As you can see by the pie chart on the right, 57% or $243 million of our net position represents our net investment in capital assets. 2% or $8 million represents our restricted net position, which those funds are restricted for external purposes. And then 41% or $176 million would be considered unrestricted. And those funds are used to meet our day-to-day obligations, and some of those funds may also be subject to internal limitations and restrictions as well. The graph on this slide shows our changes in net position over the past 10 years. And the blue bars represent our governmental activities, and the yellow bars represent our business type activities. As you can see, our business type activities net position more than doubled over the past 10 years, growing by $155 million. This is primarily driven by our utilities funds. And our governmental funds have grown by $49 million, or 66% over that same time period. Overall, our net position has grown by $204 million, or 91% since 2011. The next statement I'll discuss is a statement of activities. This statement shows the changes in net position in terms of total revenues and total expenses. And information on this statement is consistent with what you've heard in previous budget presentations and what you'll hear from Eric in his CFO report later on. Our general fund revenues are primarily driven by property tax and sales tax, and the three major departments that drive expenses in our general fund would be our parks, streets, and public safety. And then the four major funds that drive business type activities would be our electric, wastewater, telephone, and the Brookings Health System. As you can see from the circular chart, this shows our relative net position in terms of the city, BMU, and the hospital. And as you can see, 40% each for the city and BMU, and then 20% of our net position is represented by Brookings Health System. Next, I'll discuss some financial highlights of 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic played a major role in our budget and financial performance in 2020, and our budget and planned projects were revised due to the economic uncertainties at the beginning of the pandemic. Our leadership prioritized projects based on opportunities for local businesses and grant funding, and some of the projects that went on despite the pandemic were the Bob Sheldon Athletic Complex, the airport apron reconstruction, various street and drainage projects, and then some progress was also made on the fire department indoor training facility. Another major highlight in 2020 was our local government COVID recovery funds. Our finance team managed this grant and maximized reimbursement opportunities for things like payroll, PPE and other supplies, remote work and communication equipment, and sanitizing our office spaces. We realized $4.1 million in total reimbursements from this fund, and $3.8 million of that went directly to the city. $192,000 went to Brookings Municipal Utilities, $120,000 to Brookings Health System, and Brookings Area Transit Authority received a reimbursement of $16,000. It's important to understand that the general fund balance increased in 2020 by almost $4 million. This means that even without the local government COVID recovery funds, our general fund would have still ended in a surplus due to the cost-cutting measures that were put in place by our leadership at the beginning of the pandemic to operate within our means during those uncertainties. Then finally, I'll just go over our 2020 financial statement audit. We're pleased to report that there were no internal control deficiencies, no instances of noncompliance, and no material weaknesses for the reporting period. As I said before, we submitted our financial statements for the GFOA award program, and BKD CPAs and Advisors of Lincoln, Nebraska completed our audit on June 29th. We currently have proposals out for, or we're currently reviewing proposals, I guess, for auditing services for the next 3 years, and we're going to be making a recommendation to the council for that in September. This has been a quick overview of the 178-page report, and if you'd like to see the full report, you can access that on our website by going to City Departments, then the Finance Department, and Annual Comprehensive Financial Reports. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me now, or you can contact Eric or myself with any questions in the future.
Thank you, Ashley. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll have Eric Rangel, CFO, to present us the second quarter of 2021.
Good evening. A little bit more finance, but I'll try to be quick. Let's start with the first half. As always, we start with our tax revenue. The table on the left of tax. The first column is the type of tax. The second column is our budget as a total for the year. The third column is our prorated budget. That means where we should be at this point of year based on historical intakes. The next one, it's our actuals. The one following the two columns in yellow, the first one's our surplus or deficit versus our budget at this point of time. And then the last column, or sixth column, would be the percentage variance. So the story here, if we look at the first total bolded row there, is that our sales-driven tax is about 9.7% better than budget, or $694,000. The chart on your right shows also that year over year, our growth has been 8.6%. So we're not only growing year over year, but since our budget is conservative, we're actually doing 9.7% above budget. If we add the property tax, which is the second bullet line, our full tax-driven revenues for the first half are 9.4% higher, or $844,000. So this is a material increase versus budget, but we gotta be cautious that this is being compared to COVID last year, which were lower numbers. So even though it's a good story, we gotta keep that into perspective. And lastly, I would just like to note that our current experience growth, it's in line with what we've budgeted this year. So we expect that all things being equal, we will end up the year at budget or at a surplus versus budgeted in terms of revenues. So this slide just gives a little bit of a snapshot to the revenue by industry. And the trend is the same as last quarter, where we've seen decreases in the construction, manufacturing, and transportation industry. However, these industries' decreases have been offset by increases in the wholesale trade, the retail trade, the finance, insurance, real estate industries, and the service industries. If you would like more detail on this, you can access our city tax information website, which the link's listed in this slide. The next slide provides an update on the remote seller tax. This is sort of called the internet tax. And this information dates back from October 20, which is when the Department of Revenue started reporting our tax levels. And just a quick stat, on average, since it's being reported, it's about 7.3% of our total sales tax. This year, it's been fluctuating anywhere from $76,000 by month to all the way to $109,000 by month. It'll be interesting when we start getting comparable data year over year to see what the trends are. This is also in our website for our tax report. The next slide shows a little bit of a snapshot of the general fund that Ashley was discussing, but how we're doing compared to budget. The structure is the same as the tax revenue. The only addition here is the last column on the right is how we're doing in terms of revenue. This revenue is not tax-driven. These revenues are the fees and other expected revenues that we're expected to collect. The story here, we look all the way at the bottom, is that as we see it right now, we're at 44.1% of our expenses. At first half, we should be at 50% more or less. That represents right now a $864,000 surplus versus the budget. This surplus is mainly driven by timing of revenues, but also some vacancies, especially in the PD department. In terms of the revenues, we've also been, we're higher $509,000. That's mostly timing of revenues. So right now, revenues are very stable. You can see within the department, some of them are currently at deficits. We've investigated those, and they're just driven by timing as we compare to things hitting earlier this year than expected. We don't expect any of these departments to run at a deficit. We expect that at the end of the year, all things being equal, all the departments will meet budget. Next, we have our capital fund. The table on your right, the CAP, the first row shows that we're all the way to the right at 17.6% or $1.9 million of usage. The pie chart on your right shows what the distribution of the expense at the end of first half is. Mainly fire department expenses, infrastructure work on streets, bond payments, and vehicles bought for different departments of the city. It is important to remind that the heavy activity for this fund is in the third quarter, which is happening right now and ends in September. Overall, our budget right now at the end of first half is 30% of budget. And again, no red flags here. Everything looks on track. Moving on to the City Council priority project list. We'll start on the left side with the general fund reserves. Just as a reminder, these references are the unassigned reserves of the general fund, which starts by our estimate of where we are. The first number we have there is $14 million. That's the unassigned reserves that we're currently estimating that the city has. We take out our reserve, our operating reserves dictated by our G&A policy. At the end of the day, we're left with $10.5 million to fund the City Council priority projects. The table right below that shows $1.4 million of approved projects by City Council. These are the facility improvements that came from the McKinstry study. If we factor that out, we're end up with $9.1 million available to fund our primary projects. These projects have not been officially approved by City Council, but at some point they've been shown interest and would be the next in line to approve. The list here shows them in priority order. So the first project is the 2022 facility improvements, which are about $1.1 million. The fire department training tower for $440,000, the public safety center for $7 million, the housing study for $40,000, the food bank for $30,000, downtown master plan for $35,000, and then the indoor rec facility for $850,000. The total of these unapproved primary projects is about $9.7 million. Doing the math, if we were to fund all of them at this level, we would be at a deficit of $664. It is important to note that the city is actively looking for grants for this and the projects on the right side of the chart as well, and we will adjust our recommendations to fund as we receive them, but that's the current snapshot. And lastly, on the right side, we have our secondary projects and then our desired projects, which are not in order of priority. Next slide, we'll talk about the financial performance of the Swiftville Center for this first half. I'd like to focus on the third column of numbers here because that shows our surplus or deficit versus budget. And as you all know, our first half of this year was very challenging for the industry, and it translated the same for the Swiftville Center. Right now, the revenues see that a 64% reduction or $951,000 lower than expected with budget. With that, the Swiftville Center management actually were able to reduce expenses by about 50% or $757,000. That equates, because we weren't able to reduce as much as the revenue reduction, we're currently sitting on a projected $193,000 deficit to budget. However, we believe, all things equal, that the second quarter will be better and the new management is booking and it's aggressively implementing revenue-generating strategies that will help reduce this deficit. In addition, we're also exploring potential revenue loss grants. There's one called the Shuttered Venue Program that we're researching, which could help offset some of the revenue losses, or more to come on that, and I will keep updating the council as we made any progress on that. And lastly, I would just like to provide a venue management transition update. Spectra took over management as of last week on August 1st, and they're getting ready to host the Willie Nelson concert tomorrow, which they are expecting around 4,000 attendees to that event. So, a little bit of an economic update. I'd like to just focus very quickly on the table there. The real GDP or growth estimated for the U.S. In 2021 is about 6.6% growth. That slows down in 22 to 3.8%, and then 23 to 2.5%. This growth is mainly driven by consumer confidence, fully reopened economy, and higher savings among all factors. Locally, we expect the same growth to be even or maybe stronger in our region, just because we're experiencing the same factors and trends for the key growth for the U.S. as a whole. However, I think this is very important to be cautious about. We're closely keeping an eye on three main factors that most of us are aware of. Number one is the tight labor market, the supply chain issues, and a potential another COVID wave, which could jeopardize our growth and slow down growth. So we remain wary of that, and that's our guidance for now. Next, I would like to provide an overview of the American Rescue Plan. This is, if you put it that way, it's kind of like the second round of COVID relief funding for governments. This table shows what is allocated to local governments. So I'd like to divide the left table in two sections. We have the direct allocation and then the additional programs. So from the direct allocation, the city has been allocated $4.3 million all the way to the bottom of the table, bottom left, which could be used to pay for eligible expenses that happened between March this year and December 2024. And the early guidance that we've received from the federal government is that it could be used for revenue loss, premium pay, some infrastructure projects, or public health or negative economic impact offsets. No clear guidance has been released yet, but that's kind of like the early guidance that we have. On the right side, there are all additional programs, which means additional grants above and beyond this $4.3 million that cover different areas such as small business, infrastructure, connectivity, and public health. So with that, the city developed a strategy, and we hired an advisory firm to help us maximize the grant opportunity that's currently in the market. And per their recommendation, we will aggressively pursue all the other programs, which are on the right side chart, to be able to not tap into the $4.3 million direct allotment unless we need to. So the strategy is to maximize that one and then go after our allocation. The guidance for the other programs has not been released yet, but in the meantime, the city is collaborating with our economic development agencies and BMU to develop a list of projects and prioritize them based on the city council's strategic plan and be ready for when the guidance comes out so that we're ready to apply and again, capitalize on these opportunities there. On the other hand, staff is also working with the state to learn about the direct allocation and also maximize the opportunity there while complying with all the guidance. And lastly, I'd like to share the good news that our city has been awarded an AA3 or investment grade rating by the Moody's Investor Service in 2021. This categorizes our credit position as high quality with key favorable credit factors such as healthy financial position, affordable debt, and pension and other liabilities. I believe that the city has maintained this credit for longer than the last 3 years. And lastly, I would just like to thank our predecessor, the former city council, and our former city leadership for leaving a solid base on for our financial health that is key to achieving this credit or maintaining this credit rating. With that, I'll open it up for questions. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry.
Council Member Nick Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, I had a couple of questions. One of them is related to something you just noted about the American Rescue Plan.
Sure.
It sounds like this next round of funding or this round of funding could be used to cover revenue loss. Is that new? I seem to recall in the first round we couldn't use it to make up revenue loss.
Correct, is one of the main changes.
Okay. That seems like a good thing as we think about facilities that are still trying to operate in a different environment. My other question comes from our slides are different numbered than yours. So I think it for you was like slide 37. It was the city council priority project list slide.
Okay.
At the very top, and this is a refresher for me, but I suppose items, they might question the difference between under the general fund reserves, the difference between the general fund reserve balance of 15% and that budget stabilization reserve, why we break them out in different line items. And I know that's, I think by charter we're required to do that. I'm just curious why we break them out separately.
Yeah, and that was actually a new policy that we created. Best management practice has about a 15% or 3-month reserve for most industries and local government. More importantly, because the city of Brookings is so dependent on sales tax and it's so variable at times, especially through things like what we're experiencing here with our local economy, we added an additional 5% on top of that to assure that we can still provide those essential services to our citizens that they desire through times of economic. Now, within that policy, there's also some restrictions. If we tap into that 5% stabilization, we have to cut the organization in order to refund that to make sure that we're having those reserves funded. So it's about 20% at the end of the day, and that's just to assure that the council never has to cut operations for our citizens.
Thank you for breaking that out. I know for some folks, they maybe have frustration when they see growing reserve numbers. But I think that stabilization line item was an important consideration. So thanks for articulating that. My last question is one that I'm not certain we know the answer to yet. But when I saw that big monthly number coming from the remote seller revenue, I was just curious if Amazon will continue to be considered a remote seller after the falls, or if we know the answer to that yet.
That is a good question. I'll have to do some research on that.
I have no idea what percentage Amazon sales make up of that.
And we probably wouldn't be able to know that.
Sure. It just seems as though that's an impressive number, $75,000 plus monthly. And if Amazon's not considered a remote seller after that distribution center opens in Sioux Falls, I would think that number might decrease.
Well, I guess I'm looking at the definition in the note, and it states that the definition of a remote seller is the one that lacks a physical presence in the state. So based on your question, I don't know if the operation would be considered part of their business, or is it just logistics? But either way, if we don't get it there, we would get it through sales tax. So it would just shift buckets at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council priority project list. And the last time we looked at this, it seemed like the numbers were quite a bit lower. And now they're like up to 14 million. Am I missing something, or?
So in terms of the reserve or the cost of the project?
The current estimated unassigned liquid assets balance.
And that's a good question. Audit that Ashley just wrapped up, we go with estimates, and we have sort of like a variance factor there. So we sort of like updated this balance based on the actual result. But and then last time, I don't believe I broke down the stabilization reserves. They were kind of like taking out, and I just left you with a number, which may, look different at the end of the day. But I believe last time I checked the difference, we're about $300,000 less than what we projected last time. So we were probably like a $10.8 million to start with, and now we're at 10.5.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brink?
First, I wanted to say kudos to the finance department tonight, and it's great to see how well you've done nurturing that credit rating and protecting that for all of us. So thank you for that. My question is about the relationship that we have with Baker Tilly. I think that's the vendor. I'm curious, I think you mentioned there are unknowns in terms of how that money is going to ultimately be able to be spent from the federal government. So I'm curious about how Baker Tilly can help us and how we compensate them. Is it based on if they're able to help us, or are we paying a flat fee regardless of if they're able to actually help us get through that process?
Great question. So the reason why we partner with them is because they have grant experience, and as we all know, we're sort of short-staffed at the city as a whole, but we want to take advantage of this opportunity. So it's kind of like an outsourcing of research grants, compliant document, and they have the right experience. The way we're tackling this is like the city, BMU, and Economic Development Agency, we came up with a list of 40-something projects, and we provided them to Baker Tilly, go out and research and let us know of available grants. And so they're being compensated by the time spent doing that. And then obviously if we see success, and we will continue partnering with them. If we don't, then we will just take it somewhere else.
I would add to that, if we see a grant that Baker Tilly tells us we have potential of obtaining, they would ask for a certain dollar amount to write that grant on our behalf. And what we'd have to do is determine whether or not it's worth the funds. For example, if we're looking for $1 million grant and there's high potential we can get it and it costs $20,000, that's something that we'd recommend doing.
And we have a high trust that if they say it's not worth going after, it would be something that we're not going to pursue.
Correct.
Thank you.
And it's not that they do the research on their own, they connect us with the people. Like we've had multiple calls with the Economic Development Agency based in Sioux Falls. And so we're involved, but they kind of like do the heavy lifting and then they bring us on board. So we're definitely involved as well.
Councilmember Byrne.
I just wanted to draw attention to one item on the priority list, and that's the fact that even though we have some of these kind of set in a certain priority, the ones on the left and then the ones on the right kind of being secondary but not necessarily set, those are subject to change, correct? And I think one that we can certainly use as an example is the dog park for Sex Hour Park. That's on the list here, but as we know, we've been looking at the grant for that and kind of moving forward with that process. So I just wanted to maybe bring attention to the fact that even though we have this priority list set somewhat in order, some of that is subject to change pending opportunities with grants and things of that nature.
Correct. No, those are our recommendations, but yes, you're correct. I was reviewing this with Dusty, but the package was already out. It's like, we got the grants, like we'll remove it for next snapshot. Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad it's still on there. It is a great illustration of the fact that these can change and we're actively pursuing grant opportunities. And so I think it's great, but just wanted to note that for the public that these are definitely subject to change.
Correct. And that 44 project list that I was mentioning for Baker Tilly, most of these projects are in there too, to see if we can find funding for them.
Councilmember Bacon. Okay, thank you very much, Eric. We do not have Anna here tonight, so there won't be an SDSU student report. Open forum. Is there any member of the public that would like to address the council on an item not listed on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to the next one. We have no contracts, change orders, no ordinance first readings, public hearings, and second readings. Second reading, action and ordinance on 21-026, an ordinance establishing procedures for false security alarms in the city of Brookings, South Dakota. Our police chief will present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. On 21-026, ordinance governing false alarms, false security alarms. The purpose of this alarm is to encourage, or this ordinance is to encourage security alarm users to properly use security alarm systems in order to reduce or eliminate false alarms. The Brookings Police Department has responded to 159 alarms in 2019 and 150 alarms in 2020. There's a given level of danger for our officers as well as our citizens when officers respond to these emergency calls, as well as a significant amount of time that is spent. This ordinance is intended to reduce the number of false alarms that we receive. And when considering this ordinance, the police department spoke with peer communities in the area to determine if like ordinances were in place in those communities, and we found that they were in several communities. This ordinance will allow for penalty fees to be charged to businesses and homeowners whenever law enforcement personnel have to respond to 2 or more false alarms within a 12-month period. But it does also have provisions to allow the police chief discretion in charging those fees. Stand for any questions at this point, if the council has any.
Before we do that, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, close public comment. Is there any council discussion or questions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Bacon.
Aye.
Brink.
Aye.
Collins.
Motion passes. All right. Item 8B, second reading on an action on ordinance 21-027, an ordinance establishing the number of medical cannabis establishments in the city of Brookings. Before we even start any discussion and we have the opportunity to go through the information session the next week, I recommend that we table this item along with the next item in the agenda. And I make the motion to table this motion, or I make the motion to table this item. Is there a second? We can have a little discussion on this and for reasoning or anything like that, but I think I highly recommend that we do this. Any comments, questions? Is there any public comment?
Good evening. Emmett Reistroffer from Sioux Falls. I only want to share a comment because I won't be able to make it next for a couple minutes. I got a few notes.
Right.
So Sioux Falls City Council's hearing their ordinance that same night, so I could try to drive up, but I don't know. May I ask what time the study session is on Tuesday?
5:30.
And is that open to the public?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll try to
But
make.
here's the deal,
Yep.
though, is it's an information thing.
Mhm.
The public gets to just stand there and watch.
Yep, very
So,
good.
Okay.
So I'll just talk for a couple minutes, and then anyone is welcome to email me with follow-up questions, and if I can think of anything useful before then, I'll send it out.
Okay.
So just a couple thoughts. Very grateful for the city to do some due diligence and really good research on this. I thought the city attorneys did a terrific job at the last meeting. Not every city in South Dakota is that lucky to have good research to support the decision. So that's the first thing I think is just really great to point out. Brookings has good information available. What I wanted to point out is, even though I'm a coyote, that might be a sin around here, I am fully aware of SDSU being a leader in agriculture, and with Brookings being a community that has strong ties to the agricultural side of our state. To me, it would really make sense for Brookings to look at cultivation facilities as an opportunity. Sioux Falls is not open to cultivation facilities for whatever reason. We're struggling to find out why, but our officials there do not want these cultivation facilities. There's only one county in the state right now, Lincoln County, in the unincorporated areas that has decided to allow these types of facilities. So I just wanted to point out, I think there'll be a lot of discussion around dispensaries, but I'll just talk real quickly about cultivation. The types of jobs these facilities create are much higher level than the retail side of the industry. Oftentimes graduate level type of degrees in agricultural science. You have lab chemists. If you do just a Google search, we're up to about 320,000 jobs nationwide right now. Go look at current job listings at these facilities and see the types of requirements that the industry is looking for, the types of degrees and talent. And I definitely think Brookings has some of those folks available to fill into those positions. Plus, there are dozens, maybe many more. I'm aware of about a dozen universities around the country that also partner with the industry on research programs. Just a number of things. It looks like I'm out of time, but that was kind of my main point on cultivation. I did want to touch on the concept of a municipally owned dispensary. I've heard there might be some interest in that, and I know that Brookings has a liquor store. So if I could just encourage you to look into Bonneville, Washington. There's only been one experiment nationwide, and it didn't work out so well, mostly legally related with the liabilities that Section 20 currently protects the city from privately licensed businesses. If the city were to run the business, I don't think you have the level of protection under federal law. So I would love to follow up with any of you who'd like to talk about this, and hopefully I can make it Tuesday. So
Thank you.
thank you for your time, Mayor and Council.
Yep.
Have a nice night.
Any other public comment?
Ned Horsted, I'm the executive director of the Cannabis Industry Association in the state, representing businesses, entrepreneurs, folks that are excited about the economic opportunity that this new industry will bring. First, I want to echo what Emmett just said, that this looks really good so far. I think the big question is how many of each of these you select. There's kind of two ways to do this. You can limit them. You don't have to limit them. at all, which you might expect someone like me to say, keep it as open as possible. What we have seen in some other states is, litigation. If you have, if you limit it to 2 in any of these license types to apply, one of them doesn't get it, they get upset, they start throwing money around, litigating. So you're probably all aware of that. I just wanted to call it out. To the second point, since under state law you're required to allow at least 1 dispensary, the other 3 license types, I just want to step through those real briefly here, because there was in the city of Sioux Falls, kind of a blunder when they first rolled it out. They were going to ban all testing facilities. I just want to remind folks that, and as a science-minded community around SDSU, testing is like the de facto regulator for the industry here. Make sure you have safe products, good paying jobs. I don't think that every community will have a testing lab. The state could probably handle all the testing required for medical cannabis with a handful of them, but really recommend you at least allow, a testing lab, if not a couple. Onto product manufacturing, there seems to be in the conversations that I've had throughout the state, fear of extraction facilities and product development. I want to just mention that under state law, any type of product development falls under that sort of license type. So a lot of times there seems to be some fear around volatile chemicals, and there's two separate types, right? There's solvent-based and solventless extraction, or hazardous and non-hazardous is probably a good way to put legal terms into it. One is like squeezing an orange. The other is like dropping an orange into chemicals and extracting, the citrus and whatever else. So very important to have those. There are a lot of people that are excited about, creating edibles, which one extraction lab would actually create the oil. The other one would, make gummies or cookies or, whatever they're doing for medical patients in the state. And then finally, cultivation. Again, Brookings being an ag school, I can't imagine not having that as an option. But the big question here is, is it the role of government to decide, to pick winners and losers? And when you're talking about capping licenses in general, that's kind of what you're doing, is deciding who can and who cannot get involved in this new industry. So I'm out of time. I'll drop some business cards with the assistant city manager over here. Happy to answer any questions you all have now or in the future.
Could you please state your name and the organization you represent again?
Yep, Ned Horsted, Cannabis Industry Association of South Dakota.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item of business, is there any comments, or do we just go to a vote table? Councilmember Wendell?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a note. I appreciated the comments that Ned and Emmett made around cultivation and testing. I think so much of our conversation has been about retail dispensaries, and I hope next week we can have a bit broader focus that includes kind of the 3 legs of this stool.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Brink? Councilmember Hilton Byrne.
I know that in the past, it has been just a regularly monthly occurring item that happens. More recently, we've been doing them a little more sporadically. I'm wondering if there might be a desire to bring them back monthly, because I do think there are enough topics that our city has, even if at a study session we just had the various departments of the city present on what's going on and give us an update from the different committees that we have. I think it would be really helpful to return to a monthly recurrence of the study session rather than having them just more sporadically. That way also, I think the public would know a more regular schedule of this is when the study sessions occur.
Yeah, we definitely, so council knows and the public knows, we definitely plan on doing that starting in August through the end of the winter. What we usually do, what we have planned on doing is during the summer months to take the study sessions off because it's a lot of work for staff and we can't take vacations because we're constantly putting together that packet. And so it gives us at least a 3-4 month window for staff to have a little bit of reprieve, work on some other things. So definitely, yeah, we plan on bringing it back every month, and we have items already booked up for you guys. So plan on some fun activities and discussions.
Okay. Call the roll.
Tilton Byrne,
I'm sorry, what's
Motion to table.
Oh, aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Bacon,
Aye.
Brink,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye. All right, that'll come up on, it'll be last meeting in August. There you go. All right, and then item 8C, second reading action ordinance 21-028, ordinance establishing procedures for the licensing of medical cannabis dispensaries in the city of Brookings, South Dakota. And I'll just preempt on this and make a motion to table this item until the 28th also. Is there a second? Been motioned and seconded. I don't assume that we'll have any public discussion on this. Any comments from the council? 24th. Very good. Thank you. Call the roll.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Bacon,
Aye.
Brink,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Okay, item 9, other business. Item 9A, action on amendment to the Armory Development Agreement. And Mr. Struck will inform us on this situation.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Before you tonight is an addendum Armory redevelopment project. This was within the original development agreement. There was a point of time where the due diligence was to be completed, and I believe it was July 1st of 2021. The development team approached the city and asked for an extension prior to that expiring. And it's really not really of any fault of their own. They've been working through some of the different agencies. We've seen some of the design plans. Unfortunately, I have a project of this magnitude. And then with significant staffing changes with the State Historic Preservation Office, they've had to almost essentially train some of the staff out there and worked with the National Park Service. So they're working through that process. They're also working through some of their financials on their end. They're asking for an extension that would move it back about 1 year to June 1st of 2022. We have met with the development team. They showed us, kind of some of their drawings and details to date. They're working on their financing as well as kind of wrapping up any last minute details with the historic portion of the project. They would like to also change this so it gives them a little bit of flexibility. The original development agreement had it in 3 phases, with the first phase being the due diligence, the second phase being the Armory, and the third phase being the hotel. And they want a little flexibility there in that they may be able to do both projects simultaneously or individually. And so they're still planning to move forward with the project. It just kind of depends on what makes most sense financially and from a construction perspective. And so they're hoping in early 2022, they will be able to go to bidding and they'll have a lot more of their questions answered at that time. Rather than asking for a 3 or 6 month extension, they just said, let's push it back 1 year and hopefully we can wrap everything up prior to that and move towards construction. And they didn't want to be cumbersome with the council and coming back and asking for multiple addendums to the original agreement. This project is consistent with your strategic plan from a sustainability perspective as well as economic growth. And with that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
Okay.
So moved.
Just, Mike, does the city incur any expense while that building is sitting there? Are we heating it, or we do anything with it, or?
I believe the utilities have been turned off. There is one of the expenses associated with it is the city did agree to cover the costs of repairing the roof back to its original condition and trying to weatherproof it. That is a part of the project that needs to occur sooner than later. That is a expense that would be TIF eligible once that TIF is established. That's really the only expense at this particular time.
Okay, and we wouldn't do that until we know that the project's gonna go forward then?
Actually, the way the development agreement is written is the development team can proceed forward with that roof repair at any time, but the city is expected to cover the costs, and we just felt it was appropriate to have their contractor be involved with that process, so we would know through the bidding process, and if they wanted to address it sooner, they certainly can, and then that's an expense that we would incur.
Any other questions?
Avery,
Aye.
Bacon,
Aye.
Brink,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Tilton Burn,
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Motion passes. So we're pretty much done tonight, except for going into executive session later. Is there any items that the council members would like to bring up in the future? Okay, and then obviously we're having a study session next week on marijuana starting at 5:30, and also gas prices in Brookings. And then August 24th, we'll probably have a report from an SDSU student, hopefully. And then ordinance tax levy, first reading. Third reading ordinance on establishing regulations for cannabis establishments, or zoning. And then also the other two that we tabled this evening, obviously. Temporary alcohol application for an event at Pioneer Park. And then public hearing for video lottery request from MG Oil for the Country Pantry number 19 location, which is probably called the Depot, or it's otherwise formerly known as the Depot. And then we will have a city progress report from the assistant city manager. And that being said, there will be no business after the executive session, I assume. Entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Never mind. Oh, you're right, right. Executive session pursuant to SDCL 125-2.5 for purpose of preparing for contract negotiations or negotiating with employees or employee representatives. Call the roll.
Voice vote.
What's that? Oh, it's a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Sorry. Thank you.